Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sir Simon Clarke, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to Onward's first speaker event of the new year. It's also my first as Onward's new director, and it's a privilege to take up this role at a critical moment for the future of conservatism. Since our foundation, Onward has set itself at the forefront of conservative thinking, and I'm fortunate to have inherited a very talented team from my friend Seb Payne, our outgoing director. I'm delighted that we're being joined by Michael Gove as the chair of our new editorial board. The board will be made up of some of the best and brightest minds from across the Conservative family, who will help to support and challenge our research output. I'm also very pleased indeed to welcome our new head of research, Eve Norwich, who joins us from the Competition and Markets Authority, and to celebrate the promotion of Gavin Rice as our new head of political economy. We're likewise very fortunate to enjoy the continued patronage of Danny Finkelstein as our president. Onward is renewing itself for the opposition years. We'll play a full role in helping to refresh Conservative thinking and the party's offer to voters. We know our country faces profound challenges, economically, demographically, and in terms of the size and efficiency of the state. And we'll work tirelessly to help develop authentically Conservative solutions to all of those. For too many people in Britain today, life just isn't working, especially younger generations. And the one thing that's certain is that the status quo will not stand. In saying this, I hope to capture the authentic spirit of our guest today, the Leader of the Opposition, the Right Honourable Kemi Badenoch MP. It's worth noting that it was exactly 50 years ago this week that Margaret Thatcher announced her intention to stand for the leadership of the Conservative Party. She did so amidst a crisis of confidence, identity, and above all, trust in the centre-right. Writing in the Telegraph, Mrs Thatcher said, "We lost because we did not appear to stand for anything distinctive and positive. My kind of Tory party would make no secret of its belief in individual freedom and individual prosperity, in the maintenance of law and order, in the wide distribution of personal property, in rewards for energy, skill and thrift, in diversity of choice, and in the preservation of local rights in local communities." And over the next 4 years, she led a programme of intellectual renewal that lit the way to escape the failed post-war consensus. It was searingly honest, as well as optimistic, patriotic and exciting. I know nobody better placed to deliver a comparable such programme today than Kemi Badenoch. Kemi has embarked on a journey that is no less brave and no less important than that which the Conservatives undertook between 1975 and 1979. That's why it's so great to have her with us to set out her thoughts about where we stand today in the battle to regain the trust of the British public. And I invite you to join me in welcoming her warmly to Onward today.
Simon, thank you for that very warm introduction. I'm absolutely delighted to be speaking at Onward's first event, especially as it is also now under new leadership. We are all getting poorer. Politicians across all parties have not told the truth about this, and instead keep prescribing quick fixes that are actually making things worse. The problem is broader than one party, one leader, or one period of government. Generations of leaders and entire ranks of senior managers have been trying and failing for a long time. Many have not been honest with the public about the challenges we face, and others have not even been honest with themselves. We are a great country, but we've lost our way. The truth is that Britain is failing to compete in a world that is changing, and it is not working for its citizens, certainly not the way it used to. Back in the 1980s, it took just months to save up for a house deposit. Now, it is over a decade. And for many, the dream of owning a home is impossible. Jobs which didn't require a degree 20 years ago now need two, loading up to £50,000 of debt on someone just starting out. One of my favourite quotes is from the economist Thomas Sowell. He says, when you want to help people, you tell them the truth. When you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear. The Conservative Party is under new leadership. From now on, we are going to be telling the British people the truth, even when it is difficult to hear. The truth about the mistakes we made, the truth about the problems we face, and the truth about the actions we must take to get our country out of this mess. It's hard not to feel sorry for the Labour government. It's hard because they have walked into some of the same traps, like assuming keep raising taxes and there'll be no consequences. But I don't feel sorry for them because, as we saw last week when Keir Starmer labelled people calling for an inquiry far right, he is what is wrong with politics. It's legalism, not leadership. And Labour are having even worse problems than we did because they presented policy without a plan. Policies without a plan are not policies. They're just announcements. That's why Labour are struggling. It's the old cliche that failing to plan is planning to fail. Because when you haven't worked out what you're going to do in opposition, you will accept whatever you're given in government. That's why Rachel Reeves snatched winter fuel and taxed family farms. Those options were presented to us time and time again by officials, and we rejected them because they would hurt so many people for so little benefit. The Chancellor took them because she has no ideas of her own. It's the same with education. The schools bill that is going through Parliament now has one or two bits on safeguarding that may be good. The rest of it is worse than garbage. It is pure vandalism. It's quite clear that these ideas aren't really Bridget Phillipson's ideas either. They are a shopping list of all the complaints that the education unions had about schools right from the days of Tony Blair, now wrapped up in a bill that is going to destroy the education of our children over the next 5 years. The public will never trust politicians unless we can admit our mistakes. Labour are making a lot of mistakes. But the difference between me and Keir Starmer is that he doesn't believe that he's ever made a mistake. I will acknowledge the Conservative Party made mistakes, and I understand why the British people made it so clear in July that they wanted a change. We were making announcements without proper plans. We announced that we would leave the European Union before we had a plan for growth outside the EU. We made it the law that we would deliver net zero by 2050. And only after that did we start thinking about how we would do it. We announced year after year that we would lower immigration, but despite our efforts, immigration kept going up. Those mistakes were made because we told people what they wanted to hear first and then tried to work it out later. That is going to stop under my leadership. If we are going to turn our country around, we're going to have to say some things that aren't easy to hear. Let's start with our problems. We think we are rich, but we are living off the inheritance that previous generations left behind. A complacency that Britain will always be wealthy, and a refusal to live within our means. We owe it to that next generation to leave an inheritance for them and not mortgage their future to make our lives more comfortable. And that will demand the kind of tough, soul-searching conversations we're not having right now. Energy supply is so vulnerable, more vulnerable than ever, and our energy is far, far too expensive when it should be secure, cheap, plentiful. Demography is destiny. People are having fewer children. Our society is getting older. We are living longer and needing more support towards the end of our lives. Look at productivity. A shrinking group of people are working to support an ever-growing number of those who are unable or unwilling to work. The information age means it is easier than ever for rogue governments to destabilize us and for rogue companies and countries to steal our know-how. And no ifs, no buts, we simply cannot take all the millions of people who want to come here from elsewhere. Our country is our home, it is not a hotel. If people arriving don't want to integrate into British culture, they shouldn't be here. And it is not controversial to say that. And that's why we need new leadership. It doesn't matter what colour of government you have. These structural problems need fixing. Government needs to focus on the things that matter, but it isn't, because it is already doing too much and it's doing it badly. This has to stop, because the dream of every generation that our children can have a better future than we did is slowly dying. It's dying because as our problems have got more urgent, our politics has got less serious. Since July, there has been more discussion in Parliament on Oasis tickets than on our £2.7 trillion debt pile. That has to stop. The young people I speak to are deeply despondent that their country is unable to provide them better opportunities, let alone guarantee health, wealth, and prosperity. I share these concerns. They motivate me every day. And I worry that our public services will continue to deteriorate despite us paying ever-increasing taxes to sustain them. And I worry that our armed forces will not be upgraded fast enough for a darker and more dangerous world. That's why Labour have to course correct now. But instead, we see them cancelling the good things we did and then doubling down on our mistakes. Labour are shrinking the economic cake right in front of us, wrecking business confidence, destroying jobs. They are suffocating the spirit of enterprise. Tiny bits of growth in the economy can hide millions of personal recessions. Life gets tougher as wages slip further behind another round of price rises. Millions of mortgages will be fixed at higher rates than necessary as a direct result of Rachel Reeves' economic mismanagement. Millions of jobs will never be created because business owners decide it's just too hard and there's no point if the Chancellor and HMRC are just going to punish them for it. Labour treat business as a cash machine, as if its only purpose is to give them ever more money to satisfy their desires for ever more spending. Business success is treated with suspicion, a burden to be tolerated rather than celebrated. It doesn't have to be like this. Last Friday, I spoke with a group of workers in Derbyshire. They are the backbone of our country. They have little time for politics. They're not interested because they are trying to build a better life for themselves and their families. They want government to do what it says it's going to do, and they don't really ask for much more. One lady, a single parent, told me just how much impact rising prices were still having, that it just seemed to be one thing on top of another, that nothing seems to be getting better, and it feels like no one is looking at it. Our country is tired of politicians promising the earth, but never having a plan to deliver it. They've seen it all before, and they aren't falling for it again. And part of this is because too many politicians haven't worked normal jobs or run proper businesses. Most of Starmer's cabinet have barely even worked for a business, let alone built one. They've never ever had to live with the consequences of their mistakes. So we need to change. Change that actually sorts out our problems. Change that we should have done more of. Change that Keir Starmer is clearly not bringing. And that means the Conservative Party doing things differently under new leadership. First, We must restore trust. We will start by fulfilling the role the British people gave us, being an effective opposition, fighting for common sense and truth, building a plan which actually delivers. We need the government to do well in order for our country to do well. But they are failing on the basics. Labour may have a supermajority in Parliament, yes they do, but they are fast losing their legitimacy in the country. And why? Because during the election, Starmer hid that he doesn't want what the British people want. But everyone can now see the truth. He's a lawyer, not a leader. Second, we are absolutely going to keep saying what people in this country think. We're not going to be quiet about the things that are too important for our country. In the last 2 weeks, people have told us to be quiet about the decades-long scandal of rape gangs. They want us to be quiet because they're uncomfortable about potential racial and cultural motivations behind these crimes. Well, the Conservative Party is under new leadership. We will not do that. Those victims have waited too long for justice. Let's take the post office, another scandal that needed addressing. Hundreds of postmasters wrongfully convicted, decent lives ruined, a national scandal. We were told that it was being sorted, that ministers didn't need to get involved. And yet the system was so slow. So I made sure that victims got justice with an unprecedented law to quash the unfair convictions of sub-postmasters. Under my leadership, our party is going to be about telling it straight. We need more people in politics who will do the right thing and who will use their common sense even when they are attacked. When I was a minister, I took on extremists who were putting women and children in harm's way. They called me a transphobe. They even called me homophobic. They said I was fighting culture wars as I tried to stop young children from receiving irreversible transgender procedures without any evidential basis. That same ideology led to male rapists being put in female prisons. This was one scandal other politicians were too scared to tackle and tried to ignore. I fought and I won. We will not ignore. Third, we are going to push Keir Starmer to do the right thing for the good of the country. We can't afford for Labour to fail. We will back Keir Starmer when he does the right thing. I don't care who gets the credit. We just have to start getting our country back on track. And finally, we are going to tell people why conservatism matters. We have gone through many iterations over these past 14 years, and at times it felt like our core beliefs had become secondary. It left people disillusioned. It made the task of governing harder, and it didn't work. No more. To rebuild trust, we have to show how conservatism improves the lives of British people. We will rediscover the idea that everyone contributes towards society, not just calculates what they can take out of it. We will again be the party of meritocracy. We believe that if you do right by your community, your family, your society, you will succeed. And if you don't, you likely won't. Our society is treating those people who do best badly and the people that do worst well. Everything is upside down. That's the opposite of fairness. Fairness is the idea that the ledger of life reflects effort, agency, and contribution. You know what helps working people? It's world-class schooling that allows them to master complex topics, it doesn't sugarcoat, and prepares them for the ups and downs of the future. You know what helps working people? It's being able to walk down the high street and not see antisocial behaviour or the casual disregard of our neighbourhoods because local bureaucrats have given up and crime is not punished. You know what helps working people? ensuring that they don't spend January until June earning taxes for the government. You know what else helps working people? A government that demands higher standards from public services, that's able to discern between public spending that is vital, moral, and fair, and public spending that is wasteful and neglectful. That's my conservatism. It's a conservatism which deals with the problems of today, which prepares us for the challenges of tomorrow. A conservatism which leaves a better legacy to the next generation of young people who will be around much longer, long after those in power now have left the stage. And real conservatism is intergenerational. It is guardianship. It isn't a quick buck for today. It's the guarantee that tomorrow will be better, richer, and safer. And why does this matter so much to me? It's because I know what it is like to have something and then to lose it. And I don't want Britain to lose what it has. I grew up in a poor country, and I watched my relatively wealthy family become poorer and poorer and poorer, despite working harder and harder as their money disappeared with inflation. I came back to the UK, age 16, with my father's last £100 in the hope of a better life. So I have lived with the consequences of terrible governments that destroy lives, and I never, ever want that to happen here. I became an adult fairly early. I was living as a lodger with a friend, studying part-time at an FE college to get my A-levels while working at McDonald's to pay my way. I know what it is like to feel alone. I know what it is like to have to decide between paying for food or paying for a bus fare. I did not study politics. I studied engineering, and after that, I went to night school and I got another degree. So I see politics the way most people see it, as an outsider, not having the perfect language or the perfect presentation, but wanting to fix things. I am fascinated by how to make things work, and I can see how our country is just not working for ordinary people out there. I'm determined to change that. So the Conservatives are under new leadership. We are going to do things differently. And this is my message to people watching today. We need a government that supports, not punishes those who do the right thing. We need to rebuild the state to be more focused, more efficient, and more effective. We need to make our country more resilient, secure, and prosperous, where hard work is rewarded, where children can have a better life than their parents. It may not feel like it right now, but our country's best days are ahead of us. Britain is a land of opportunity, not a country to apologize for. So if you want real plans rather than announcements, join us. And if you want a better country for our children, join us. Together, we can fix the damage that Labour is inflicting. Together, we can make politics work again for the first time in a generation. The Conservative Party is changing. We are under new leadership. We are back in the service of the British people, and we are going to give you your country back. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone. I would now like to take some questions from the media. And I have a list here, the first being Martin Brown from the Daily Express.
Thank you very much. You talk about you want to do things differently. You were part of the last government, and so what are you going to do differently about Brexit? What specifically are you going to change? And if I may, on Keir Starmer, you said that you would back him if he makes the right decisions. Will you back him if he sacks Rachel Reeves as Chancellor?
So, on the first question, doing things differently doesn't require us to steer away from conservatism. We are conservatives. I want to take us back to the very best version of who we are. On Brexit, I think there is a lot more that we could have and should have done. I did what I could as business secretary. I removed the supremacy of the European Court of Justice. We removed about 4,000 EU laws. But what we need to start doing is looking at where we have competitive advantage with countries around the world and use our regulatory system to exploit that competitive advantage. What I worry about with Labour is they're looking to just copy what is already out there and just stay aligned with what the EU is doing without thinking about what is best for the UK. We have to think about what is right for our country first and then make decisions that are in the interests of the British people. That is how we will get the Brexit opportunities. And there are many opportunities in areas like tech and AI, even in farming, with novelty foods, for example. There's so much more that we can do. And so, yes, I will back Keir Starmer if he does the right thing using Brexit opportunities. If he does the right thing with Rachel Reeves, I will also support him in that. But his women problem is not my concern. I have to focus on the Conservative Party and making sure that we rebuild the trust of the British people. Hugo Guy from the Eye.
Thank you, Ms. Badenoch. Can you talk about the economic sort of troubles that the country's faced in the last couple of weeks?
The economic
troubles that the country's faced in the last couple of weeks. How serious a problem do you see that being for the country, and what specifically would you like to see the current government do differently to sort of take us out of that?
Right. So I think that there is a fundamental misunderstanding on the part of this government, that it is not government that creates growth, it is business that creates growth. And sometimes actually government needs to get out of the way. They believe that they will create growth by telling business what to do. They've put on an enormous amount of burden with Rachel Reeves' last budget, not just with national insurance, but also with things like the family farms tax, the family business tax. And then you look at what's coming down the line. Their employment rights bill is going to be a disaster. No growth is going to come. I have been speaking to businesses since before I was leader, and what I can tell you now is that this budget has demoralized them. They are telling me that they're closing down. They are telling me they're letting people go. They are definitely not hiring. On Friday, as I said at PMQs, one business said, I don't think I'm going to be here in 4 years. I may not be here next year. That is the problem. Growth comes from business, and we need to start supporting business. Not just the big, large corporations who can often weather these things, but some of the smaller organizations, smaller businesses. We are the party, not just of big business, but small business too. We are the party of entrepreneurs. And we need to start creating policies that support those who want to start taking risks, start employing, creating businesses, because that is what is going to generate wealth for our country. Chris Hope, GB News.
Christopher Hope, GB News. Kemi Badenoch, it's mid-January. It's the first time you've given a speech, a policy-free speech. The polls have reform ahead of you in the polls. You're going backwards, according to YouGov this week. Why have you allowed Nigel Farage to make all the running, become the voice of the right, as he seems to be at the moment? And can you answer yes or no? Will the Tories and Reform UK merge to beat Labour before the next election?
Thank you, Chris, for your wonderful question. So first of all, I will start by saying that Nigel Farage says he wants to destroy the Conservative Party. Why on earth would we merge with that? Firstly. But on the point of not having policies, I've just told you, Chris, policies without plans are just announcements. What the Labour Party has been doing, what Reform is doing, is making announcements. We did that as well, and people didn't like it. How well did net zero work? That was the policy. Where was the plan? So what I'm saying is that we're not going to start making promises without plans. We do have policies. We want lower taxes. I've said that we're going to reverse some of the stupid things that Labour's doing, like taxing family farms, for example. We have positions on all these things. We want stronger defence. We want to make sure that we lower immigration genuinely. Those are policies. The plans are going to take time. And that means us going away, thinking about them, and developing them with the expertise of people around the country, not just going on TV and saying what we would like to do. That is not serious. Helen Katz, BBC.
If I can ask you, the government's announced that it's going to get Louise Casey to do a rapid review of grooming gangs, and there's going to be 5 local inquiries. Is that enough? And if I may, your message has been Labour's getting it wrong, you in the past have got it wrong. So why should voters not just be looking for a different option? Why should they wait to see if you get it right this time?
Thank you. So I welcome any work that Louise Casey is able to do in this area of the rape gangs. But I don't think that local inquiries are enough. Oldham has decided not to do a local inquiry and asked for a national inquiry because it knows that local inquiries are limited. We had people resign from the Greater Manchester local inquiries because they couldn't get the evidence they needed. They couldn't summon people. Only a national inquiry can do that. That is why we are calling for a national inquiry. It doesn't need to take forever. It can have a limited terms of reference. So all work being done in this space is welcome, but we still need a national inquiry. And on the point of why should people trust us now, we are working to rebuild trust. It is true that we got some things wrong, but we also got a lot of things right too, like on education. And Labour are unravelling not just what we did, but also the 30-year consensus going back to Tony Blair on increasing standards and improving the quality of education in this country. We're going to need people who understand this and who know how to build, not just people who have emotions, people who can think about a plan, develop one, and deliver it. And I think only the Conservative Party can do that. Kate McCann, Times Radio.
Thank you. Kate McCann, Times Radio. Kemi Badenoch, in your speech, you accused Keir Starmer of legalism without leadership. I suppose I want to have another go at what Chris was asking you, because some people might say, you know, that speech would make a great column or a think tank paper, but it's not leadership. Leadership is about doing something. So when will you stop explaining the problem and start doing something? And if I might add, you were asked about Rachel Reeves and you said Keir Starmer's woman problem is not my concern. What's the relevance of her gender there? Thank you.
Thank you. So on the point of showing leadership, we have to do the job that the British public have given us, and that is to be an effective opposition. I know that most of the times that we spoke, I was business secretary, but we are not the government now. We don't do, we effectively hold the government to account. What I can do is set out a plan, show a pathway for how we can have a better country in the future. That is what I'm doing now. That is exactly what I'm doing standing here. And one of the things that we're going to need to do is show that we are different. That is showing leadership. I have to do that. That is my job as the leader of the Conservative Party. There are many things that I disagreed with under previous premiers. I'm not here to litigate the past. I'm here to set out the future. And you ask, what is the relevance of Rachel Reeves' gender? Well, when she stood up in her budget, she wanted everyone to know that she was the first female chancellor. I didn't stand up here congratulating myself for being a female leader or being a black leader. And that's why when you open the door to those things, it means that people can comment on them. Thank you. Martina Betts from The Sun.
Martina Betts from The Sun, and if I may, I would like to ask you a story on our front page today. Do you think heads should roll at the BBC for failing to vet a rapper who turned out to be a convicted killer? And should the public have been told about who he was before listening to his music? And just on a broader point, what are your thoughts on the BBC licence fee? Thank you.
Okay. I pay my BBC licence fee regularly, and that's all I will say on the BBC licence fee. But on the broader point, I do think that serious questions need to be asked. I haven't read the full story, but I saw the headline on the cover of The Sun, and I think it is absolutely shocking that someone who murdered someone is then being promoted by the BBC and allowed to share lyrics that I understand are violent. But it also speaks to a broader problem about how we treat people who do wrong things, and also the relationship that the state has with a lot of musicians and organizations. The public sector should support free speech. That doesn't mean it needs to pay for it. I had a similar problem when I was business secretary. There was an organization called Kneecap, IRA supporting, and lots of violent lyrics, and I stopped public funding for it. I don't think the government should be paying for these things. I don't think public broadcasters should be paying for these things. And they took me to court. Labour decided to drop the case. They are not serious. We need to show and we need to set an example, and we need to show where we draw the line about what we think is right or wrong. It's not about free speech. And I think that there is a broader problem here where we've forgotten how to calibrate when to say something, when to get involved, when to step in. And I think that that's what's happening at the BBC. Sam Coates, Sky News.
Sam Coates, Sky News. Kemi Badenoch, listening closely to your speech, I'm just wondering whether there's a danger that it's all just a bit, well, depressing. Because you gave a long list of things that you think are intractable problems, and a long list of things that you're against, Tory politicians, Labour politicians, national officials, local bureaucrats, parliamentarians, all sorts of policy failures. You haven't given much sense of a solution. You're quite upfront about that, but isn't this an issue? And also, isn't it all just a bit joyless, which in political terms is a problem because it's a contrast to Nigel Farage?
So I think that this is a great question. And I'm speaking based on where the Conservative Party is. We have just suffered our greatest ever defeat, ever, in hundreds of years. I don't think the public will start trusting us if I turn up looking like I'm having a great time and everything is fantastic. I want them to know that we understand why they asked for change, why they voted pretty much every party they could do in order to kick us out. So I'm doing a serious job here. I'm talking about new leadership, and I want them to know that things are different and we are going to be earning their trust. But I did say some positive things. I talked about the next generation. Intergenerational unfairness is something that I really care about. We've got to give young people hope and optimism. We've got to give them sunlit uplands, and I will do that. Nigel Farage has been knocking around for 20 plus years. He's been leading all sorts of different parties, so he's had a head start. I've been leading the Conservative Party for 10 weeks. Let's see where we are in a few months and a few years. Thank you. Shahab Khan from ITV.
Shihab Khan from ITV News. During your speech, you spoke about telling the truth about mistakes that previous Conservative governments or Conservative leaders have made. Given your current position on grooming gangs, do you therefore believe it was a mistake from previous Conservative governments not to call for a national inquiry during their 14 years in office? And a second question, if I may, do you still stand by your position that Reform UK's membership numbers are inaccurate?
Right. So on the first point, I do think that we should have had a national inquiry, but I only think this now, having looked at the recommendations of the ICSA report. So we commissioned inquiries. We had local inquiries. We did a lot. We had, even after that report had recommendations, we had a gangs task force that found 550 new perpetrators. That is why I think we need a national inquiry. So we did some things, but as the results came in, my view is that we should have done more. So saying it was a mistake would be hindsight analysis. At the time, we assumed that those inquiries would cover it. Now we can see that there is still more to do. So let's do more. And the point I was making last week at PMQs was that this isn't about blame. It's not about whether Keir Starmer should have done this or we should have done that. It's about what we do now. We spend a lot of time pointing fingers rather than just getting on and doing stuff. Let's get on and deliver justice. And on the second question, I stand by the tweet I made at the time. I think if you read it very carefully, you'll see I was very specific. But I don't think the public are interested in litigating membership numbers. They want to know what we are going to do for them. And that is what my speech today is about. And finally, Katie Balls from Spectator.
Katie Balls from The Spectator. First off, you spoke in your speech, Kemi Badenoch, about mistakes that the Tories have made in government. Is there anything you want to apologise for on behalf of the Tory party to voters watching this? And then secondly, of course, we have Donald Trump returning to the White House next week. And there's lots of talk about a potential vibe shift, a change in the mood. And I wondered, do you think the political temperature is changing where people are saying things they were too scared to say before?
Okay. So on the first question, I remember when we had a speech last month about immigration. And that's one of the things where I came out up front and said, we acknowledge that we made mistakes. I was knocking on a door recently, and I was apologizing to the person at the doorstep, and he said, I'm not interested in your apology. I want you to get these people out. And that's what I'm going to be focused on. On the second point about vibe shifts, I think that things have been in a state of flux for at least 10 years. There's been a vibe shift almost every 18 months, and we're seeing the latest iteration. And we are going to have to be flexible as a party. We're going to need to make sure that as the country is changing, as it's evolving, we are representing authentic conservative values and showing that whatever the situation, we are the best placed party to help deliver hope and optimism and a better future. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
take it off the handle. Just put it onto there like that.